Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Soul of Business with Blaine Bartlett. I am your host, Blaine Bartlett, and today, folks, we were talking a little bit before the show started here. My guest is, how would I best put this? He's representative of a client that I worked with back in the 1980s, when I lived in Japan, and I kind of had a giggle to myself when the invitation to have him on the show crossed my desk, and I went, "Of course," and then found out exactly what he was doing, and I said, "I can't not have him on." Given number one who he is, but number two, what he's doing with who he is, and I really want to frame that: what he's doing with who he is. Former head of Boston Consulting's North America group. Currently involved with Boston Consulting Center for Inclusion and Equity. Joe Davis has got a stellar career. He's a 37-year veteran of Boston Consulting. So he has seen, literally, and I've lived in the consulting world for a long time myself. He has seen everything. I will guarantee it. You don't play in that
this
arena.
Space, that's for sure.
Yeah, and not see all kinds of stuff come down the river. So, Joe, welcome to the show. It is an honor and a privilege to have you here. I appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you very much, Blaine. That's very nice of you. I think the privilege is both ways. I'm very honored you even want to listen to me or talk to me. So that's wonderful, and I appreciate the intro. And you're right. I'm sure I haven't seen everything, but if you talk about large scale consulting, I've seen most of it come and go.
You've seen a lot of stuff come down the pike. I'm going to be less concerned with the consulting conversation, and more concerned with actually what you're experiencing today is, and I'm going to use the word here because it applies to me as well, as an elder, and and it has less to do with the gray hair.
Yeah,
but it has more to do with the experiences that in 37 plus years you've actually had, and I'm specifically going to organize this around a leadership conversation. Boston Consulting, your client base, primarily is large enterprise organizations, but you've also got a portfolio of mid-sized organizations that you interact with. And that's certainly where I kind of came into my familiarity with BCG was in Japan. You weren't necessarily dealing with the large behemoths. You were actually positioning yourself to make a big inroad and a big difference with some of the way that some of these moderately sized organizations were actually working. Leadership has changed.
You said it. Yeah. You said it.
And I'd be real interested. I'm going to start with the question that I always ask here. When you hear the term "the soul of business," what does that evoke? And then we'll migrate, I think, a little bit into what's the implication for leadership as it's migrated over, say, the last 40 years.
Yes. Of course. Not of course. When I hear the word "soul of business," when I think that, I immediately think actually what I think leadership has to be much more today, which is, understanding and seeing all the people that you're leading and your colleagues actually as humans. The day of the cog in the organizational wheel, or like, oh, you're a podcast person, or I'm a consultant, or they're a second-year consultant. That doesn't cut it enough, and I think the younger people are expecting, whether you use the word soul or whether you use the word purpose or whether you use the word values, they're expecting a much deeper connection. And we can get into this, but I think the world's changed. The work-life world is blurred, and COVID blurred it a lot more. We're both in our homes, we're not in an office, I think, and that says a lot, and I could tell stories about that. So I think that's what it just goes to the human aspect of business when I hear the soul of business, which I think is becoming critically important.
Well, which I could not agree more. And where that kind of causes my brain to move is in terms of the leadership implications. And I kind of prefaced the beginning of this with that notion. The idea of treating humans as humans, people as humans, not as cogs in a wheel, flies in the face of the stereotypical command and control model of leadership. Interchangeable parts, and if you don't do your job, we got somebody else in the wings that we can replace you with. What are you noticing? Particularly, I mean, we've got inclusion and equity as part of the conversation in the country today, and it's a polarizing conversation in some cases. What are you noticing in terms of what it's requiring of leaders in order to navigate this terrain? It's almost a minefield, it seems.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's actually, you kind of put two things out there. How do you lead today's people if they're humans and not just do what they're told? And then the whole inclusion concept, I mean, the fact that it's a diverse workforce. And I think if you want to get the best out of everybody or the most out of everybody, which should be your goal, and not in a using them way or enable them to perform at their highest, you've got to make sure they all feel, included and engaged. I think, it's interesting. You hear the same stuff, but I was reading somewhere recently that, the Gen Z and then the millennials, that's, they are feeling more lost than a lot of people. And I think part of it's coming out of COVID, but, mental health challenges, et cetera, although they also are optimistic. And, and most of our workforce is, millennials are younger now. I mean, it's well over 50%. And they do expect an empathetic leader who's willing to connect with them in different ways, communicate with them in different ways. And I hear you on, okay, well, sure, if you're not good enough, we'll replace you with the next person. So I think the difference is now people are saying, wait a minute, you company aren't good enough. So I'm going to go find a different place, and I won't name names, but even some of the most coolest companies today, I mean, I don't know about you, but I have my friends' children who go to these places for 3 or 4 years and they say, hey, it's on my resume. That's cool. That's it. It doesn't fit my values, or it doesn't fit. I'm not getting, I'm not being able to grow. So I do think that the employees that change. And I don't know if I believed in the Great Resignation because there's a lot of talk. I'm not sure everybody quit, but talented people, if they didn't feel either connected to their leader, if they didn't feel leader had values that were, aligned with them, or the organization had a sense of purpose, the best would walk. And you don't want the best walking, in your company. You don't want that. So anyway, that's, and then of course that requires all kinds of different things in the leader, in the person, not the leader.
Exactly. I'm going to make an assumption here that you're familiar with Gallup's work on employee engagement and, the study.
I think that was a poll that talked about all of them unhappy, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. What, 87%, I think it is, 87% of the workforce globally is dissatisfied with their work. Yeah. And I was, in one of the books that I was putting some stuff together for that is going to be coming out later this year. I came across 2 concurrent studies, one by Gallup, the other one by McKinsey. McKinsey's study polled leaders around the world and asked basically, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but the question was, how do you see yourself as a leader? Are you inspiring? Are you uplifting? Are you... Yeah, fully, I think 91% said, I'm rocking it.
Duh.
Well, I'm just really, I'm a good leader. Gallup, on the other side of that, asked the question, and these were 2 unrelated surveys, but they were done in the same calendar year, 2019, and polled people around the world, said, how inspiring are your leaders? How good would you say your leaders are? Again, I'm kind of paraphrasing the question.
Yeah.
But, I think it was 89% said, not so much. Now, I started parsing the data on that, and where there was a correlation here about leadership and the 87% disengagement number. 87% disengaged from the work. And we spend, and this was I think out of the roundtable, corporate roundtable. We spend about $43 billion a year on leadership development, around the globe. $43 billion. The intent is to move that 87% disaffected number. It doesn't seem like we're targeting the right cohort for our leadership development. And so I took those two data sets and said, okay, dissatisfied with leaders. Hey, I'm the best leader in the world. Where's the disjoint? My supposition is it's at the mid levels. It's not necessarily at the executive level, because most leadership development is not targeted at mid levels in the organization. And that's what employees interact with.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking when you were saying that, or I didn't want to think it might be the middle that was disconnected, but I actually believe that too. But now we're both stereotyping without knowing exactly where it was. But I do think the other thing, if you think about it, is I'll bet you, if I think of the management leadership stuff I've been through and see others go through, a lot of it is management.
Yes.
How do you set a strategy? What is your vision? What are the metrics you're going to? How are you going to get things done? And that's critical. And no matter what kind of leader you are, you have to do that stuff, and you got to get out. But they're not spending time on, hey, your people want you to connect with them differently. How are you communicating with them? Your people want to see a little vulnerability so that then they can release some of their uncertainties and fears. How do you be vulnerable? I mean, I know there's some training on that, but it's not, I don't think that's the dominant training. How do you be empathetic? I mean, it's interesting. I tell a little story. It's from your neck of the woods. A guy named Samir Bodis runs a company called Icertis, which is a procurement tech company. And he came out of Wharton. He's probably, I guess, 57. But so he's been around a while. Came out of Wharton, numbers cruncher, chaser, went to Microsoft, results. It was the previous leadership team, and then he left Microsoft and he had to go turn around a company. And he realized the company was hiding from its problems, wasn't telling the truth, etc. And he said, we're going to have to be, put away everyone, swallow a little crow here and start to be authentic and be honest with ourselves, with our employees, and with our customers. And he said, if I hadn't done that, I couldn't have turned this thing around. I couldn't turn around just with metrics. It's interesting. So, he said to me, I think this is maybe a little interesting, good story, because then he said, what I started to realize is, I've got to lead with the heart, lead with authenticity. And he said, now I started to step back and say, okay, how am I as a leader? And he said, at the end of the year, he says, I do metacognition. I separate myself from myself and look down. Was I a good husband? Was I a good father? Was I a good leader? How much better can I be? And if the answer is not much better, then he knows he didn't think very hard, has to do it all over again. Now he's a CEO, as you said. He's come up and he learned along the way. But how do you teach? Well, you can teach it. But it's trickier to teach it. But I wonder if that's part of the thing. One is the kind of training, also is not. It still might be old school.
There is a conflation, I think, of leadership and management.
Yes.
When we start looking at what actually gets delivered in service of a leadership development program. You've written a book, The Generous Leader, and in the book you outline, and I don't know, it's something that BCG actually works with as well, and it's called BLISS, the BLISS Index.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because you're talking about something here in terms of vulnerability. An old mentor of mine years ago, a fellow by the name of Dr. Will Schutz, made an offhand comment. It was really one of these drive-by things. He says, people connect through vulnerability.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I agree with him, but that is a drive-by statement.
But back that truck up. People connect through vulnerability. And most leaders have a facade. I'm supposed to know the answers. And it's kind of like, there's this suit of armor, oftentimes that I put on when I go to work. When I was doing a lot of work with Nokia, I led their global leadership initiative for about 12 years. And I amended Will's comment, people connect through vulnerability, and they did, and the appendage was, and they disconnect through certainty. And that was kind of an operating mantra with a lot of the work I was doing with about 4,000 leaders that I worked with at Nokia over the course of that 12-year decade, or that decade plus. BLISS. Where, that's the segue here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, and you mentioned two of the criteria to make. So this was a survey done with another organization of many, thousands and thousands of employees across the world, on how included they felt in an organization. Whether it really at the core is, do you feel it? Did I just blank out, or is that? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, autofocus there.
Yeah, yeah. How included does one feel? And it was very clear. And we're kind of talking about this. When you feel included, when you feel seen as who you are, when people have some respect for your lived experiences, they may not understand it all. The retention rate is much higher, or the attrition's lower. You're more motivated, inspired to engage, etc. And I think you've mentioned two things: the vulnerability, and the other one. The other one that I trigger is do you really listen to learn? The opposite of certainty. I mean, the best leaders. I got to be careful. The best leaders, the people I talked to for my book, who I think were generous type leaders, all of them say, I like to ask questions. And if it's a big decision, there's no way I know all the answers. I have to ask questions. And when you stop and ask somebody else, or first think about where are they coming from, what's their background, what might be, or where are they in the organization that's different from where I am, and what can I learn, and start to probe and ask. And to your point, the opposite of certainty, knowing you don't know it all.
Yeah.
People feel very included. Of course, you get a better answer if you have enough confidence or vulnerability to understand someone may be able to add to your thinking. It's funny how they kind of fit together, because someone thinks, oh, vulnerable, you got to cry. No, vulnerable can be as simple as acknowledging you don't know the answer and asking others to help you find it.
Yeah.
And again, the opposite of your certainty point, which.
That's, yeah. Somebody asked me, I do a program for the American Association for Physician Leadership. And I developed the program in conjunction with some stuff that Harvard was doing a number of years ago. We've been doing this thing about 10 years. And the program's called Leadership Authenticity. And early on, I was continuously being queried about, what do you mean by authenticity? Can you define that term? And I went to Kierkegaard, I went to Heidegger, I'm going to get, these are physicians,
listen to you.
people. Right. And I was kind of like, I'm not getting anywhere fast here. So I ultimately landed on authenticity is what I'm left with when I stop trying to manage your perceptions of me. And then you get what you get. Leaders, when they can step away from I'm supposed to be, something else emerges. And that something else can be very, very powerful in my experience. And I'm kind of going to a point here, a question. The idea of perturbation. We've got disruptions going on all the time, and part of the question that I think every leader eventually comes into play with here is, how do I know what to do when I don't know what to do? And that question requires a certain amount of, in my experience, authenticity.
Or humility.
Or humility or vulnerability.
Yeah, they're all the same. Yeah,
they're all, basically word. They just kind of get crunched here. With the work that you've done, particularly with the coaching / consulting that you've done with your clients, how do you position that with people? And I'm asking out of genuine curiosity here, because this is something I've wrestled with for about 40 years.
Yeah. No, so much of it, so much starts with, the person themselves and what have they been through in their lives to even, like if they've been through vulnerable moments and actually come through it, and you're fine. You're still here. Look at that. It wasn't as hurtful as you might think. But, so I think about that, either how I've engaged with leaders with it, or just listened to leaders. And a couple of things, come to mind. One, you do have to start with the level, humility or humbleness or something. And I don't think there's any great leader. I don't even wonder Jack Welch, and I could, pick him as the ultimate. He probably still picked 1,000 brains all the time.
Yeah.
I can't believe he knew everything, even though he had that impression. So they all start with knowing that they don't, they know they don't know what they don't know, and they know they do not know, and then I think when you're starting to get into humility or vulnerability or whatever, a few thoughts come to mind. One is, of course, watch or observe other leaders who are displaying any level of authenticity or whatever, and just, observe it. How's it working? What's the reaction of, oh, they're not all walking out on the person, and what is the person, what words are they using? Do those words work for you?
Mm-hmm.
Can you got to be yourself, but can you echo that, or can you pick up on that? Another thing I think is something someone told me, is I thought was very powerful, is, go back to this is to start to maybe reveal more of your authentic self. Go back, as I said a minute ago, to a moment that was a dark moment. You were nervous, you're embarrassed, whatever it was, and say, oh, wow, that worked out.
Yeah.
I'm still here.
The nature of life is evidenced in nature. Nature grows, and all of nature honors the desire to be more, to have more, and to do more. Life thrives when it's allowed to grow. And ideally, thriving is what we also, all of us, want to be able to do. Unfortunately, at some stage in life, most people find themselves settling into what I can only call a rut. And a rut is nothing more than a coffin with the ends kicked out. You want to quickly get out of any rut that you find yourself in. When you stop growing, that's when the coffin starts to appear. The simple truth is this, and this is true for everything in nature. You're going to die. I'm going to die. Every one of us dies. So the question we need to come to grips with is not, are we going to die? The question nature asks us to answer is, are we truly living? That's what motivation is about. It's the desire to move. It's the desire to grow and to excel. Have I lived? How have I lived? I'd love for you to take advantage of my Leadership Mindset Masterclass. It's all about providing you with the tools to ensure thriving for yourself and for those around you. Register today to receive the free introduction video and find out more about this acclaimed program. You'll also receive a copy of my international #1 bestseller, Compassionate Capitalism, A Journey to the Soul of Business. I'm Blaine Bartlett, and I look forward to helping you thrive.
I mean, not to talk about me too much, but I had three very quick stories. I cried through my wedding vows. I couldn't get them out. I was 23. My wife said I'm clear as a bell. I was so embarrassed. Well, afterwards, I'm going, oh, Joe, the love in the room is so wonderful. Wait, 23-year-old guy was supposed to be, I wasn't supposed to be crying. Then a little bit more sadly, my mom died when I was 30. The three brothers were speaking at service. Of course, you can imagine I cried. This time I sobbed. I couldn't get a single word out. And there, the priest, it was a priest. He said, Joe, tears are the fountains of love. And again, the reinforcement of the emotion. So I thought, okay, I didn't think it. I didn't even realize it then, but it was conditioning me. Let myself be myself. People aren't going to think less of me for it. Boy, girl, white, non-white, older or younger. It was very interesting. So I do think there's something, everyone's got to have at some moment where you revealed more yourself. The other thing I'll say, I had a colleague who used to say, he told me, I was always afraid to say I didn't know. He was a Black leader at BCG. So he's probably also worried about, whatever, people might think. And so he wouldn't say, I don't know. And if he was in a team room and he could tell things were getting uncertain, no one knew where they were going, and they were to look to him and he wasn't sure, he'd leave the room before he'd get the question. No, that's not very productive. Yeah, isn't that interesting? He was so afraid to be vulnerable. And finally he said one time, he thought to himself, this isn't working because I'm just wasting time. I'm wasting time. So he said, they asked, of course, he said, well, I don't know either. And so it was like a breath of fresh air blasted into the room. And everybody, well, if you don't know and we don't know, well, then they started this energy and exploring what we didn't know and what do we know. He said it was incredible. He said, no, I still struggle to say I don't know, but I learned a big lesson there. And I think to your, I think to your question, I mean, just say I don't know a few times when you really don't, and not when you're trying to bullshit that, but sorry, I shouldn't swear, but
no, that's fine.
The other thing you do, if you have children, go ask them to coach you. Not 4-year-olds, but 13 to 22-year-olds, go ask them to coach you.
Yeah.
Especially if you're the dad. I think the mom might be a little better at that. I'm stereotyping, but especially if you're the dad, ask for coaching.
Kenny Blanchard.
Yep.
One time, I was on stage with him in Copenhagen one time, and we were talking about situational leadership and a couple of other things. But the question of feedback came up, and he looked at me, with kind of a twinkle in his eye. Now, what was interesting was his luggage had been lost, so he was actually on stage in his warm up suit, his gym clothes. And he was just fine with it. So you talk about authenticity.
And everybody else was fine because he was fine, right?
Exactly. And he said about feedback, he said, feedback's the breakfast of champions. And I've never forgotten that. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. And that leads to a question here around generosity. And I know that it seems like a non sequitur, but it actually isn't in my mind.
Okay.
The title of your book is The Generous Leader. How does being a generous leader differ from being a traditional leader? Because people have mindsets, they have models in their head about what a leader is supposed to do, and generosity doesn't typically color that picture.
Right. Yeah, I know it's an interesting word.
And there will
first off,
involved here.
I define. Yeah, though this could go to feedback too. I define being a generous leader is a leader who gives of themselves freely without expectation of direct personal benefit to ensure others grow, develop, whatever word and thrive and deliver at their full potential. You do that and you're a generous leader. And now the minute you say that, and then, you ask a question, how's that differ? Well, first off, as you and I started, it doesn't differ on management outcomes. I mean, right. Joaquin Duato, the CEO of J&J, said, Joe, you can always got to remember, outcomes still matter if you're in charge. The numbers do matter.
Yes.
However, he said, the sooner you get past that you yourself are going to reach those outcomes, the sooner you'll be able to leverage all of the humanity that works for you to get the best result. And that's, I think that's where there's a difference. You still got to deliver, but you got to, as we were talking earlier, see the people, as humans, not as a cog in the wheel. Understand that they want to contribute, and they're all bringing their own, I won't say baggage, but lived experiences and experience but you got to invite them into it.
Yeah.
And then I think the more you put your heart in the center of it, I'll use the heart as the head, heart, and hand, that kind of thing. The more you're becoming a generous leader. But it really is all down to, if I make my people better, we're all better. And of course, then you as the leader get to be better too, because the results got, you don't want to, you shouldn't have to say that part, but it's pretty obvious. And that, I could go to your feedback comment. I don't know if you wanted to build off that, but because I do think, I had some, the best leaders will give feedback, and, and they give direct feedback. I'm not a believer. I hate to watch people give what I call mush feedback. Well, Blaine, your screen's a little blurry. I don't know if you want to, what's he saying to me? What am I supposed to do? Or, Joe, that thing you did the other day is pretty good, but, I wish you had just done a little bit better. What the hell? What am I supposed to do?
What am I supposed to do with that? Yeah.
But I, when Ken, I don't know what he said beyond that nice statement, but I do think there's an importance too of a generous leader, which is, and my brother and I argue about this because my brother is a tech salesperson. He says, Joe, I get sick of these managers that only yell at me. And this feedback's terrible. And it's very interesting. And I thought, because in my mind, as a generous leader, you spend the time to understand somebody's strengths, whatever they might be. And you got to spend some time to think about it. You got to watch them. You got to observe. You just don't. And then you help. And then, of course, you identify their development needs, because that's what you do. But then you help them use their strengths to actually develop. Now, that takes work on your part. You can't just write the review. You got, with a bunch of, here's what you need to do better. And then you've got to be able to give, ideally direct, clear, non-mush feedback. And I think that is, and it could be harsh, but I think that's massively generous. I'll tell you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I think I was going to endorse that as one of the most generous things that you can probably do for somebody.
Yeah, and even there too. Well, you have to be brave enough to do it. I mean, all these executives I talked to, they all talked about watching different leaders who they didn't want to ever get the bad upward feedback or didn't want to be challenged,
Yeah.
and so they won't give the feedback because and that's really selfish. It's the opposite of generous, or it's really all about me. It's the opposite of giving yourself freely for everyone's gain. It's all about protecting myself. Well, I'll tell you, I had a friend, he's my friend, well, he's my friend, but he's also my mentor for many years. He was very good at giving me feedback along the way. And one time he told, this was a little harsh the way he put it, but one time he told me, so, Joe, if I had a room with 4 white walls, no door out, put you in the room and this other guy in the room separately and gave you a problem, and this is, we're a consulting firm, tough problem, you probably would never solve it by yourself and therefore couldn't get out of the room. Now, this other guy, Philip, would solve it every time. But then if you come out with the answer, or I give you you 100% of the time will get it done and actually get the result. He will never get it done. So, but it was kind of harsh. You're not smart enough to figure it out. But is also your strengths are leveraging others, teaming with others, finding other strengths and use that to get it done. Tap into that was his message to me. Now he said it pretty directly,
Yeah.
But it was very powerful, and it was a very powerful lesson to me.
But that whole notion of with others. I mean, there's as far as I can tell, relationships are everything, and leadership is it's a high contact sport, if you will.
Right.
It's all relationship. In the book, Generous Leadership, you talk about allyship. Yeah, can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yeah.
There are distinct types of allies that we actually organize around and interact with.
Yeah, and in that one, I will say, I mean very clearly being allies for those who don't have the same starting position. And you commented on controversial. I just don't agree with those that say, "Oh, it's all a level playing field," and I don't think the data supports them. And we could have a different conversation on that. So I'm coming from that premise, which is, but you can take the concept of allyship and turn them right into mentorship too. Let me be very clear, But it's very it's interesting. I think in this concept, there's 3 types of allies. One is just the button wearer, Black Lives Matter month, LGBT Pride month. And that's nice, I guess, but if that's all it is, that's not so much. Then I get into, then there's performative ally who's maybe being supportive of others, diversity, et cetera, because there's metrics that they need to hit and those kind of things. So that's better than nothing, but that's not really an action ally, which is what I talked about. And when I describe this could be any great mentor. Now you can see I'm a white male, 60 plus years old. I don't know I don't know what people need as far as a real ally. So I asked a lot of my friends, and it was very clear. The first thing is be someone who helps open doors and opportunities for me and let me walk through and deliver. Because sometimes a mentor might, I'll get you in there and I'll tell you what to do. No. Let me try to deliver. And if I fail, so be it. That's my responsibility. But make sure I get a chance, and, be there. The other thing they always say is too many of the allies are there until something gets rocky, until they blow it, and then they disappear.
Yeah.
And that is not an action. Be there. And the other point is make sure you give me your top 5%, as one of my colleagues said. But it really is all about opening the door for opportunities and then encouraging them to walk through. I'll tell you something. I had a conversation with somebody about DE&I and this kind of topic. And they said, well, Joe, this is a harsh statement the person made, you all, so he probably was lumping me in the woke group, want equal outcomes for everybody. And I know, look at your face. I said, wait a minute, who said that? Where did you get that? I said, I want people to have a chance and have an equal chance. And and then they go through the door and they got to deliver. They don't deliver. Life is life. I mean, fair is fair. They may have more disadvantages even along the way that you have to make sure you think about and don't just judge, maybe judge more thoughtfully. Yeah. But it was very interesting. I thought, wow, this whole D&I noise, if that's what this person perceives, those of us that think give people a chance, it's all about making the same outcome. Well, no wonder we're talking past each other, because I don't think I ever said that,
No, I never even thought that.
I did that. Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. I made the comment about even once you walk them through, I'll tell you something, just all back to this listen to learn and other lived experiences. I was once I used to do these deliberate discourse dinners at BCG. And it was 8 to 10 people at a table, of course, all diverse backgrounds. And then we'd have a conversation on race. It was facilitated. And this fellow was at my table. He was it's a stereotype. He was a manager. I know he's a person too, but he's a manager at BCG. And he said to me, he said, Joe, do you understand what it's like when I wake up and go out the door in the morning? He said, I sit there and worry. He lived in Philadelphia, which has nothing to do with anything, but he can walk to work, that I might get shot that morning. Do you wake up every morning and wonder if you're going to get shot? Never crossed my mind. Maybe now if I go to a big stadium, I get a little nervous, but that's, so even when someone has a chance to go through the door, a portion of his brain is being used for survival, and everybody else at BCG's brain is going. And so now all of a sudden the person is a little bit of a disadvantage if you need to be on, which you can't compensate for everything, but just even understanding that someone's maybe a little more generous and gracious in how they help coach that person and develop them, understanding where they're coming from is a very powerful lesson for me.
Thank you for sharing that. We're going to probably end with that because I'm not here, but I think that is so profound. I truly do. The idea of generosity in large part there's a ripple effect with generosity. Yes. And part of that has to do with, if I'm generous with somebody, I actually begin to learn about their lived experience, and it informs how I can actually navigate that next step.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you never pretend I understand where you're coming from. No, you bloody don't. But I want to try to understand, or I want to, you worry about getting killed. Oh, I never thought about that. Yeah. Oh, how do I be respectful of you and help you? It's just, it's a very powerful story, of course, as you said, but it's you don't forget it. You don't forget it.
No, I'm going to keep that one for a while. That's pretty telling. Folks, we've been listening to Joe Davis, Boston Consulting Group, 37-year veteran of some of the most fascinating environments and stories and experiences. Joe, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I would love to have you on. I could continue this conversation for a while. I really could.
We could call me in 4 months. We'll do it again, or I'll come visit you in Whidbey Island. Next time I'm in Seattle, I'll find you.
Well, I'm going to be out in Boston in a couple of weeks. So
okay,
there we go. Anyway,
great,
folks. Thank you for listening. Soul the Business of Blaine Bartlett. It's been a great show today. As always, my admonition to you will be pretty simple. Find a way in your life to be a center of distribution, not a center of accumulation. I think you'll find your life works a whole lot better. And until next time, have a great rest of your day. Take care.
I love that close.